welcome everyone to this live stream on Urho Talks. Today we are here to talk about the Syriac Hymnal, the app and the actual resource started by Dr. Gabriel Aydin, who is joining here with us as a panelist. I'd like to thank the Urho team for initiating and creating this wonderful opportunity to speak about this really important initiative. The Syriac Hymnal is a project Dr. Gabriel Aydin launched in collaboration with the Syriac Music Institute. It is now available on the App Store. This hymnal serves as a carefully developed resource that preserves and documents the ancient chant traditions of the Syriac Orthodox Church. It combines Western musical notation with specialized adaptations to capture the distinct character of Syriac chant, making it more accessible to a wider audience while highlighting the rich oral traditions from different Syriac Orthodox communities. So in this discussion, Dr. Aydin will be discussing and exploring the history of Syriac chant, and he will explain the process behind creating this hymnal. Dr. Aydin is a leading musicologist and specialist in Syriac Orthodox chant, committed to connecting ancient oral traditions with contemporary academic study. He was raised in Turabdin, where he was immersed in traditional seminaries and monastic life, where he developed expertise in classical Syriac and liturgical music. He holds a master's degree from Yale, a doctorate from the Holy Spirit University of Kaslik in Lebanon, and is focused on the comparative study and transcription of regional chant traditions. In 2007, he opened the Syriac Music Institute in Rhode Island to help preserve our ancient traditions. And in 2018, he released his groundbreaking publication, the Syriac Hymnal, which offers English translations alongside specialized musical notation for the church's 8 modes, helping transform a largely oral tradition into a structured and widely accessible musical system. And the hymnal app that he released in 2025, last year, is a digital platform that provides Syriac liturgical hymns complete with texts, translations, notations, and audio recordings. I had the absolute privilege to meet Dr. Gabriel Aydin last fall at the Hymnal app release event held in November, which was organized by him and 𝐶𝐲𝐦𝐬𝐿, and with a wonderful choir, I believe from one Gabriel's church in New Jersey, who sung for that event. It was a very wonderful presentation, and I'm very excited for us to be walking through this once again. So, without further ado, Malphono, the floor is yours.
Shamosho Martin. Well, thank you very much for the great introduction, Shamosho. First, I would like to wish you and the Urho the way some of 𝐒𝐲𝐫𝐢𝐚𝐜, a blessed great land and Holy Week for some, I believe, and to thank you for the opportunity to discuss Syriac chant. I am grateful for the chance to speak about this rich tradition in general, as well as my work on the Syriac Hymnal and the Syriac Hymnal app, which document the ancient chant.
Malphono Aydin, is your audio off?
My audio is on. Can you hear me now, Shamosho? My audio is on.
It might be from my end.
Can you hear me now? Shamosho, can you hear me now?
Yes, I think.
Can you hear me now, Shamosho?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. So again, thank you very much for the great introduction. I would like to wish you and the Urho, the way, 𝐒𝐲𝐫𝐢𝐚𝐜, a blessed Holy Land, and Hashu Week, Holy Week, for some other parishioners. And thank you for the opportunity to discuss Syriac chant. I am very grateful for the chance to talk about the rich Syriac musical tradition in general, as well as my work on the Syriac Hymnal and the Syriac Hymnal app. I would also like to thank everyone who is joining us. It's a joy to share with you this important topic at the heart of our Syriac faith and identity, the sacred music of the Syriac Church, or Syriac chant. So here I would like to ask Shamosho Martin if he can display some slides so we can begin our session. And go ahead, Shamosho. Okay, I believe our viewers can see the, yes, they can see the.
From Shamosho Jobin can switch the slides.
Yes, I can move this back and forth.
Okay.
Okay. So first, I would like to clarify, whenever I use the term Syriac chant, I am referring to the sacred liturgical music of the Syriac tradition that is chanted or sung. So the sacred chant tradition is hymnography that expresses theology through poetic text, or in Syriac we call them mimri, and distinctive melodies that have been transmitted through centuries of worship. Syriac chant is then a rich hymnody and the tonal chant tradition preserved for centuries in the book of 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐴, often called the treasury of chants. So when we talk about the Syriac chant, we are talking about one of the oldest sacred musical traditions in the world. Its roots go back to the first centuries of Christians, and even further to the melodies sung in Jewish synagogues and in the temple during the time of our Lord Jesus Christ. So our musical heritage carries thousands of hymns and melodies, almost all shaped by the system of 8 musical ecclesiastical tones and sung in the beautiful Syriac Aramaic language. Of course, this tradition didn't appear overnight. It developed gradually over centuries. So we don't know everything about its earliest beginnings before the 3rd or 4th century. But once Christianity was accepted under Emperor Constantine, everything began to flourish. Churches grew, communities expanded, and worship became richer and more expressive and more melodic. So church melodies started to become more sophisticated, and various melodies types and genres started to emerge. There are a few key moments in the development of Syriac chant that are really worth highlighting. The first one is the story of Syriac music. So the story begins long before the church formally organized its hymns. So first, in the earliest centuries, Christian communities picked up musical practices from the world around them. Gentile converts brought their own musical backgrounds, and Jewish synagogue chant, along with the melodies of the temple, deeply shaped early Christian worship. Syriac communities also observed sound from the broader musical culture of the Near East. All of these influences became the foundation of what later grew into the Syriac chant tradition. It was a simple beginning, but it eventually flourished into the rich musical system we know today. So the second stage, as you can see on your screen as well, is the era between the 4th and 8th centuries. So Syriac music entered its first golden age. So this was the time of St. Ephrem, St. Jacob of Syriac, and many other great poet theologians. They composed a large number of hymns. Yes, many of those hymns were lost over the centuries, but a large number survived. And the beautiful thing is that we still sing many of them today in Syriac churches around the world. The third, it's from the 9th to the 13th centuries. Here something new happened. The music became more organized. This is when the 8-mode system took shape and began appearing in manuscript and church services. Scholars like Barsalibi and Barhebros wrote about the modes in detail, explaining how each works, when it should be used, and why it matters. So because of that, this period is often called the Golden Age of Syriac musicology. It's the first time in our history that the structure of Syriac music chant was clearly explained. And the fourth, after the 14th and 15th centuries, there wasn't much written about our music. But in our own generation, something wonderful has begun, a new wave of preservation. His Eminence More Glorious Yohanna Ibrahim of Aleppo, together with Malphono Iskandar, took the huge task of writing down the 𝐏𝐫𝐨𝐼𝐞𝐿 in musical notation, an achievement our ancestors could only dream of. And more recently, the Syriac Hymnal that I prepared has added another step toward preserving and sharing this music with the world. So all these efforts, past and present, are helping ensure that our ancient musical tradition not only survives, but continues to grow and inspire future generations. So why did prominent Syriac hymnographers, such as St. Ephrem and others, choose music as a means to inspire and teach the Christian faith? So before exploring how sacred music serves as a tool for teaching and inspiration, it's important to first understand how this phenomena came to be regarded as sacred and why we call it sacred music in Syriac, known as موسيقي مقادشته. So here we can briefly explain why we call it sacred chant. So for Syriac Christians, and indeed for all Christians, music is not mere decoration or emotion. It is prayer itself, a way of speaking to God with the whole heart. The Church Fathers understood sacred melody as a bridge between humanity and the Creator, where sound becomes a vessel for divine encounter. St. Ephrem, the harp of the Holy Spirit, composed thousands of hymns to express and teach theology through music, while St. Jacob of Syriac, known as the flute of the Spirit, did likewise through his poetic and liturgical works. In this tradition, music, especially the human voice, we know it as it's called in Syriac, the 𝐾𝐻 or spiritual harp, is regarded as the most sacred instrument. It shapes the mind, lifts the heart, and offers joy to God when raised with devotion. So for this reason, prayers and supplications are meant to be sung and chanted with harmony and beauty, with the fullness of our ability, because they represent our finest offering to God, who is worthy of the best we can give. So when offered in this spirit, our prayers ascend to heaven, And as the tradition teaches, the angels themselves join in our chanting, accompanying our voices and lifting our offering before God. So this profound idea is also reflected in a hymn from the 𝐏𝐲𝐬, which beautifully expresses the understanding. Here on the screen I put the stanza where it says Hosoi fin'ira yrawmo القل تشمشتو ضرعوني ومرن كموباسم قولو ديالدا ودودم عفرونو دبكي نوري روحوني زمرين شبحو ومسقين التوديث. You can read the translation on the screen. So this reminds us to sing beautifully and humbly to please God. And Barsalebi warns against loud and showy singing. So worship is not about volume or loud voice, but devotion. So music is theology in sound. When we hear a 𝐏𝐫𝐸 or 𝐾𝐲𝐦𝐧𝐬 or any other traditional hymn in the liturgy, we enter a living tradition that unites heaven and earth, past and present, faith and feelings. So that's why almost the entire Syriac liturgy is sung and not read. So here, since we explained why Syriac chant is sacred, now I would like to briefly talk about the relation of sound or music and the text, the lyrics. So with this in mind, so now we can look closely at how this sacred tradition functions in practice, especially through the deep relationship between sound and text. So this connection lies at the very heart of Syriac chant and reveals why music is not secondary, but essential to the expression of theology. So in Syriac chant, speech and sound are inseparable. They're mixed together tightly. So the sacred word, or Malpho, and the music, 𝐏𝐲𝐬, work together, each amplifying the other's spiritual power. So music is not just decoration, it's a divine extension of the word, shaping both melody and meaning. Its purpose is never to overshadow the text, but to clarify, deepen, and transmit its message more powerfully, as Barhabros emphasizes in his book called 𝐒𝐲𝐬𝐚𝐜. 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜 معادور معادرو رباث الوث سوكولو دميلاي تشبحوثو روحنا يوثو. So music or singing is a great help to understand the words of the spiritual canticles. So the Syriac church fathers understood music as a sacred art that deepens and elevates the meaning of poetic texts drawn from scriptures. So when melody and text come together, whether in madroshe or mimre, biblical passages or theological writings, they create a unified musical liturgical expression known as sacred chant. So this theology is exemplified as shown on the screen. Here we see when Syriac sacred music is born, where the text and sound meet. So words that are liturgical, spiritual, theological, sacred, and biblically inspired. And here we see the music part. It blends with music that is ancient, liturgical, traditional, spiritual, sacred, and religious. And on this screen here, we see that together they create a timeless expression of birth, devotion, and divine beauty. And here we see that together create a phenomenon that is called sacred chant. So now we'll go back how music can be seen as a tool to teach and inspire. So here I would like to go back to the time of Saint Ephrem. From its earliest days, Syriac music was more than just art. It was a tool for teaching the faith and inspiring devotion. So early Syriac worship likely included chants derived from Jewish tradition, as mentioned earlier. By the 3rd and 4th centuries, the church fathers had begun developing teaching songs and metrical homilies to instruct new Christians. St. Ephraim hymns show that stories, melodies, and rhythms were used to teach theology and inspire new believers and help them learn scripture. Here on your screen, I put up a Mimbro, a poem from St. Ephraim. It's a madrosho. It's the paradoxes of the incarnation. St. Ephraim writes, Mary carried him as a child. The priest, which is Simon, carried him as an offering. The cross carried him as one slain. Heaven carried him as God. Praise to his Father. So this hymn illustrates the fullness of Christ's identity, human and divine, through the imagery of those who carried him, Mary, Simon, the cross, and heaven itself. Another very known hymn that is sung, during Advent, or we call it Zabno Suboro, is called Toison Wothion. Beautifully illustrates God's plan unfolding across salvation history. So, which means 3 doves fly with 3 chicks. The first carries Samuel, the second carries John, and the third carries He who upholds the world. So let us briefly approach this hymn from theological, liturgical, and musical perspective. So liturgically, this hymn belongs to the season of Advent, Zabno Suboro. It is specifically associated with the Sunday preceding the Nativity Yelda, so the Sunday before Christmas. So it prepares the faithful for the coming birth of Christ and situates the hymn within a moment of expectation and fulfillment. Since it's sung on the final Sunday before the Nativity, it's performed in the 8th tone, or in Syriac we call it tminoio, pinto tminoito, which carries a sense of completion and culmination. So theologically, the hymn reflects 3 miraculous births. Hannah, once barren, gives birth to Samuel. This in the Testament. Then we have Elizabeth, also barren, gives birth to John the Baptist, bridging the Old and New Testament. And then the third one, Mary, the Virgin, gives birth to Christ, the Savior, and this is in the New Testament. So the 3 doves symbolize prophecy, preparation, and fulfillment, and uniting the Old and New Testament into a single, continuous story of salvation. So musically and pedagogically, this hymn reflects the method of St. Ephraim and the Syriac tradition more broadly. Theology is taught through poetic imagery and melody, composed for communities that primarily learn by hearing rather than reading. Such hymns enable the faithful to internalize complex theological ideas through repetition, memory, and chant, ensuring their transmission across generations. Here, I would like to sing these before I move on to musical analysis. So this is composed in the 8th mode, and the melody goes like this. Toison Wothion, 𝐶𝐲𝐦𝐴𝐵𝐴 وابعوا به فاروق شفيري قد ميت طعين لشموي ومصعيت طعين ليوحى هيدة
طينولي لهودتين بريوثو.
Beautiful. That was beautiful.
Thank you. So, from a musical perspective, as you can see on the screen, this hymn, like many other hymns found in the book of 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜, follows a structured melodic form in Syriac known as amumu musikoyo, consisting of shuroyo, which means the beginning, as you can see on the screen, and then we have musroyo, which is the middle section, and then we have shulomo, the final or concluding section. So in modern musical terms, this can be compared to an ABA form, one of the most fundamental compositional structures. So this melodic structure dates back to the 3rd or even 2nd century, as described in St. Ephraim's poetry. So one talking about the creation of hymns. So that all this form is. So in practice, the first 2 lines share the same melodic phrase, as you can see on the screen, establishing the opening musical idea. So the 3rd and 4th line introduce a contrasting melody, repeated twice, creating a clear middle section. And the final 2 lines then return to the opening melody, often with slight embellishment, bringing the hymn to a unified conclusion. So these melodic divisions are not random. They are intentional. They directly support and interpret the text. So the opening lines present the general image of the 3 doves. The middle section, with its new melodic line, names the prophetic figures Samuel and John, highlighting their role in salvation history. The final lines, returning to the initial melody, points to Christ, suggesting that he is both the beginning and the fulfillment of all things. Here I can show you another screen with musical notation. Let's see here. So here you can see these melodic forms or musical forms are highlighted in Syriac letters, Shin, which refers to Shuroyo, another Shin, 2nd Shuroyo, then Musroyo, and then Shulomo. So in a performance, these sections are clearly emphasized. So the melody typically begins in the lower register of the Tminoyo tone, rises in the middle section, and then returns, bridging both ranges before resolving again in the lower register. So when taken together, this creates what we may call a musical icon, where sound itself visually and spiritually reflects the theological message. So this short hymn alone encapsulates prophecy, preparation, and fulfillment, uniting the Old and New Testament, and stands as a powerful example of the depth and sophistication of the Syriac musical tradition. So while much more could be said, in analyzing this structure and meaning, this brief overview highlights its richness within the time we have. Notably, all traditional 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜 hymns lend themselves to deeper analysis from this perspective, and they feature especially rich and composite poetic meter and tone. This will bring us to the main Syriac hymnographers or composers, poet theologians of this great musical heritage. Throughout history, there have been many theologians and hymnographers who helped shape the Syriac sacred chant tradition. So I won't go too deep into this topic right now, but I want to briefly highlight a few of the most important figures. Their supplications through their poetic texts liturgical use, meter, and melodies are essential to how Syriac liturgical services are practiced. Of course, we start, with Saint Ephrem, the Syrian, who is the most influential hymnographer and theologian, not only in the Syriac Church, but in Christianity as a whole. He composed thousands of poetic lines that express Christian theology and then set them to melodies, making the faith accessible to people in his time and even today. So his work are still studied all over the world, and we take pride in the fact that he belongs to the Syriac tradition. So for today's session, I will briefly mention this application. In Syriac, we call them Bo'wotho or Tborotho, of three key figures: Ephraim the Syrian, Jacob of Syriac, and Balai of Qanishrin. Each of them developed distinct poetic meters and melodies, which are used as model hymns to practice the 8 tones in the Syriac Orthodox Church. Here on the screen, I would just display the 3 different supplications composed by these 3 poet theologians. St. Ephraim's supplication, or Bo'wotho, known as 14 syllables, so plus 7 plus 7, so Mora Nafraha Ma'alain, Mora Qabil Tishmishtan, and this makes 14 syllables. Then we have St. Jacob's Bo'wotho, which is composed of 12 syllables, Qorinan Lukhmorio Moran Tol'udrona. And then we have St. Balai, which is composed of 10 syllables, Hadith Le Rahme Rithobnu Hom. So by singing these supplications, we learn and internalize the musical scales of each tone. So even though each hymnographer has a unique poetic and melodic style, of all of them beautifully cover the full range of the tones. So some well-known examples include 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜, Malphono Dr, or Hadith Rahme, which is composed by St. Balai. But among these, the most often used is St. Jacob's supplication, because its structure makes it easier to learn and sing the different modes. For example, when we sing in the first tone, this is how it goes. سبين لنا لا حمود الثمول برمش زعور ولحمو دحش منان بين استنقى So after chanting the supplication, a high deacon can easily initiate the Holy Liturgy by singing Stomon Carlos, and people will respond Kyrie eleison, and then will continue the entire Holy Korbono in the same tone. So these applications are very, very important to know and to chant, as deacons and as clergy members, which without we cannot really observe the Holy Liturgy or any other liturgical services, with accuracy. And this is briefly about the poet theologians. So then this will bring us to a chapter on Syriac liturgical chants and melodies, how they are stored and where they are stored or contained. So one might wonder, since we have thousands of hymns, where are they found and how are they preserved? So although hymns have always been central to Syriac Christian life, for many centuries, they were not organized in its simple or unified way. Instead, chants and hymns were scattered across large liturgical books, and making it difficult for clergy or parishioners to use them efficiently during services. So starting in the 7th century, efforts were made to gather these hymns into more structured liturgical books, such as the 𝐒𝐲𝐫𝐢𝐚𝐜, the ordinary book that we use during weekdays. Here, as you can see, we have the main three liturgical books displayed on the screen. We have the 𝐏𝐫𝐴𝐼𝐚, we have the 𝐒𝐲𝐫𝐚𝐜, and we have the 𝐒𝐲𝐽𝐼𝐚, which is a festal hymnary. Here we have other liturgical books, as you can see on the screen, like Malphono, anaphora, and other texts. But again, I go back to the prior slide that shows the three main liturgical books that contains hymns and melodies. Let us focus mainly on the book of 𝐏𝐫𝐴𝐼𝐚. So among all these liturgical books, the book of 𝐏𝐫𝐴𝐼𝐚 is considered the primary book or primary music book of Syriac chant tradition. It is the heart of our musical and poetic heritage, preserving the core melodies and hymn structure of the Syriac Orthodox Church. So the 𝐏𝐫𝐴𝐚 was created as a collection of prototype hymns and melodies, so model hymns and melodies, which are the foundational tunes for nearly every type or chant used in liturgical life. And this includes several types and genres, as you can see on the screen. We have Ole, we have Madroshe, we have Kushmo, Sebloto, and here I would say we have even more genres and hymn types. So every part of Syriac worship, whether the Eucharist, sacraments, or daily prayers, follow the structure and style of the chants preserved in the book of 𝐏𝐫𝐴𝐚. So this makes the chant an essential part of Syriac Christian spiritual and musical identity. Every deacon or priest must learn at least the main hymns to lead liturgical services properly. Without this knowledge, it would be impossible to observe the liturgy correctly. Here we have more hymns, as you can see on the screen, and this will bring us to the oral tradition, and that comes with its challenges. So one might ask, how has this rich musical tradition shaped over centuries been preserved and passed down to us today after 1800 years? So let's explore how this sophisticated tradition has reached to us today. So for centuries, Syriac music has lived in the ear and memory, passed from teacher to student. So while the texts of hymns were written down, the melodies themselves survived through listening, repetition, and memorization. So this is how the process works. A young deacon or a yolufo learned by repeating each line exactly as his teacher, the Malphono, sung it. So in some manuscripts, some of the Malphono have added signs to teach or to show how the melodies are sung and taught. As you can see on the screen, we have some symbols written on top of the text. But here the challenge is that these signs only are known to the teacher himself or the yolufo. So in short, this master to disciple chain kept the spirit of the chant alive. So monasteries were central to this process. So monks and clergy trained in theology, music, and language, and nurtured the chant, while their monasteries served as spiritual and musical centers. So this structure allows Syriac chant to spread across regions, survive persecution, and retain its unique identity, even while interacting with Jewish, Greek, Persian, Arab, and Turkish musical influences. So the tradition thrived where Syriac Christians lived close together in cities, villages, and especially monasteries, where daily repetition of melodies were never, forgotten. So key centers, as you can see on the screen, we have Harput, these are cities or monasteries as well. Milutin, Mor Barsomo Monastery, Mor Hananiu, Mor Gabriel, Tanishrin, Orhoi, modern day Urfa, Omid, Diyarbakir, Sada, Tel Ada, and Mor Matta, and there are several other cities and monasteries where this tradition was preserved. So yet oral transmission came with challenges. So without musical notation or recordings, many melodies were lost or altered over time. For example, parts of the 𝐏𝐲𝐦𝐚𝐜, known as Greek canons, have disappeared. Even within a single region, small differences in performance could, over centuries, develop into a major melodic variations. So today, if you visit Syriac churches around the world, I'm sure you have Shamosho Martin here in the Eastern United States, you will hear beautiful but distinct traditions. So all tracing back to the same ancient source, yet shaped by history, migration, and local communities. So this teach us two key points. Our musical heritage is fragile and requires careful preservation, and two, it's also living and adaptable, surviving exile, persecution, and dispersion, yet continuing to sing. Here, I would like to briefly talk about these regional variations, or in Syriac known as Malphono Dr. So now that we have seen the richness and ancient roots of our musical heritage, it's important to remember that Syriac chant didn't develop in the same way everywhere. So as Syriac Christians moved from place to place, whether because of historical events, persecutions, or waves of diaspora, different regional chant dialects or Malphono Dr began to form. So each region brought its own cultural flavor and local language influences and melodic preferences. So within the Syriac Orthodox Church, these chant traditions are usually grouped into two broad families, East and West. So the Eastern tradition centers around the school of Tajweed and the closely related tradition of Bartolomé Marmatta in northern Iraq. The Western tradition includes all the remaining chant schools or chant traditions. So this split didn't happen randomly. The Tajweed Mosul region developed under strong Persian influence, while the Western regions were shaped by the Byzantine world. So over time, these very different cultural environments left their mark on the music, giving each tradition its own character. So among the Western Syriac schools, the best known ones are Mardin, in Madrashat Mardin, and Turabdi, and of course Edessa or Hoi. So all three preserve the Bethgazo repertoire, but each expresses with its own melodic shapes, rhythmic tendencies, and modal nuances. So these differences reflect the realities of communities living far apart, each developing its own accent, let's put it that way, accent or characteristics of chants. So the two Western chant traditions and Mardin are also practiced among the Syriac churches in India, as you may know, Shamosho Martin. So the school of Malankara, which belongs to Martuma and Syrio-Malankara Catholic Church, for instance, have been derived exclusively from the school of Dr Aydin. Whereas the school of Malankara, which belongs to the Malankara Orthodox Syrian and Jacobite Syrian and Knanaya Syrian churches, adopts also the tradition of Mosul, which has an influence of the tradition of Mardin. But today, the Mardin and Dr Aydin traditions are the most widely practiced. The Edison school, or Urfa, while less common today, is especially admired for its beautifully rich and highly ornamented melodies. But because Syriac chant was transmitted orally for centuries, as mentioned earlier, it's natural to hear variations from one place or even one chanter or cantor to another. So melodies, ornamentation, phrasing, and sometimes even the tone or the mode itself can shift. So choir-based traditions like those in Dr Aydin tend to keep the melodies more consistent. But in places like Edessa or Mardin, where solo cantors or chanters often lead, you will hear more personal embellishments, added ornaments, and stylistic creativity, and this making each performance very unique. Here, I would like to share with you this one example. So this is an example, a hymn found in the 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜, which is called Sagi Raboy and sung during the feast of Saturday of the Lazarus, Rising of Lazarus. So this hymn displays different melodic structure in Dr Aydin, Mardin, and Edessa. Even the first melodic sentence shows variation, though all three share a clear melodic shift toward the end. So here I'm going to chant only the first line from each different tradition, and then pay attention to the ending melody towards the end of the melodic phrase. So the first one, according to the tradition of Dr Aydin. Sagi Raboy tezmurto desar moran mgansedodum. The melody stays up there. Now let's sing the tradition of Mardin. Sagi Raboy tezmurto desar moran mgansedodum. The melody goes down up to the very beginning note or the last note. And then we have the school of Edessa. Sagi Raboy tezmurto desar moran mgansedodum. Like somewhere in between. So as you can see, this is the first line of this particular hymn, and each tradition sings it a little bit differently, especially towards the end of the melodic phrase. Here I'll give you another example to show the melodic difference at the very beginning of the melodic phrase. Here again we have a hymn from the 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜, which is called, which is sung during the departed clergy, and shows how differences in chant traditions can produce completely different melodies for the same text, as I said, especially at the beginning of the melodic line. So according to the tradition of Dr Aydin, the melody starts like this. Malphono Dr and then continues. But Mardin starts from the bottom. Malphono Dr and then we have Edessa. Malphono Dr. It's a little bit different than the other two. So as you can see, the beginning also shows some differences in the melodic phrases between these three main chant traditions. Here, this brings us now to the 8 system of tones. So it's very important to understand what tones or modes mean in Syriac music and how they are organized. So in Syriac chant or musical tradition, a tone is more than just a scale. It's a musical framework that shapes the melody, rhythm, meaning, and emotional character of a hymn. So as mentioned earlier, a major milestone came between the 9th and 13th centuries with the formation of the 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜, a foundational liturgical book organizing melodies into the 8-tone or tumane qinuth system. So here we see that after the 9th centuries, we see a formation of a tonal or modal system starting to be shaped in manuscript, specifically written in this period. Not only preserved hymns, but also included musical symbols that clarify tone structure and chant form. On the screen, you would see this example from the book of 𝐶𝐲𝐦𝐧𝐚𝐥, which is emphasizes the tone, but it's written in Greek language called 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜 or 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜, which means in Syriac means 𝐏𝐫𝐫𝐚𝐜 or 𝐏𝐫𝐫𝐚𝐜. This is also the book of 𝐒𝐲𝐦𝐧𝐚𝐥. We see the same word term used to define the tone, and in this case it says 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐽𝑜, which means the first tone or first qinuth or 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐽𝑜 in Syriac. And then here, as you can see, some melodic forms which I mentioned earlier, clearly written above at the beginning of each melodic phrase and written in symbols as a shuruyo, shulum, musayo, as you can see on the screen. And here again, it's we have these signs that clearly explains the melodic form of each hymn. And this also the 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜 manuscript dates back to the between 9th to the 13th centuries. And here you see how the 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜 hymns were formed, how busy this page is with additional melodic phrases or maqala written around the page, around the manuscript, which all together form a beautiful system of hymns. And this is another 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜 called the 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜 Sheikh, or older, called older 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜, which is, belongs to the Syriac Catholic Church. And yes, so the main feature of Syriac religious music is that each feast or occasion is assigned a specific qinuth or a specific tone for its hymn melodies. So commenting in the 12th century on the importance of this connection between text and music, the Syriac poet, theologian, and hymnographer Dionysius 𝐏𝐫𝐫𝐻𝐵 says the following, as you can see on your screen. So 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜 Syriac روزت كل حد من عيدة طاكس بشمشتو دعلاو أوفل تشعيثو كولو سقار قينوثو أي كانوا نلفون الشموع روزاو دعيتو. You can read the English translation on the screen. Here on the other occasion, we have these. So it says, هوجر سريوي طاكيس لصلاوثهون بتموني قينوثو وكل شبثو ترتين أكادياس, which means قينوث or modes or tones مشمشين وفحاب شابو لقيمتو والعيدو دهو أوف بتريم شابو وبتلوث مصالين لتشيبوثو وبربع بشابو ليلضاف علوه بسودي قاديشي وبحمشو لشليحي وملفونة يلضاف علوه بسودي وعنيدي أوف بيوم شبثو يلضاف علوه بسودي وعنيدي وكل يرحم شمشين لتموني أكادياز أخمو 𝐃𝐲𝐦𝐧𝐬. So this is how Bartholomew describes the system of 8 tones, which beautifully and clearly shows that the system was practiced during his time, which in the 11th and 12th centuries. As I mentioned earlier, the system was initiated long before then, but was not fully complete or fully practiced. But here we see with the Bartholomew's explanation that the system was fully functioned system. So what are the names of the Syriac tones or Syriac modes and their functionality and distribution of seasons? So Syriac music or Qinto is based on the classical system known as ثمانية قينوثو, as I mentioned earlier, the 8 system of tones. So this concept can simply be described as singing a chant melody in 8 different qinot or 8 different tones. So the qinot or tones have numerical names, such as 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜, 𝐿𝐵𝐸𝐚𝐜, 𝐿𝐵𝐸𝐚𝐜, 𝐵𝐸𝐚𝐜, 𝐏𝐵𝐸𝐚𝐜, 𝐿𝐵𝐸𝐚𝐜, 𝐿𝐵𝐸𝐚𝐜, and 𝐶𝐵𝐸𝐚𝐜, as you can see on the screen. So these ثمانية قينوثو are divided into 4 pairs. Instead we call it زوجو or زوجي, distributed to weekly, so 2 tones every week, and monthly 8 tones, so 8 tones every month cycle. So just to support that structure of dividing tones into زوجي, in his writing, Barhebros or Abroyo emphasizes the concept and also maintains the theory that ثمانية قينوثو function currently and concurrently with the church calendar of feasts and occasions, as he asserts, وكاد يسحب شاب من حب شابه حاثو مشارين القدمو يطرايونو نوقف لطرايونو تليثوي وشركو وبيموتو شحيمي القدمو يحمشويو نوقف لطرايونو شتيثويو لتليثوي شبيعويو ولا ربيعويو تمينويو وبحفظ. Here on the screen we see one weekly cycle, you know, how the modes or the tones are paired together. On this screen we see one full cycle, which is consists of 8 weeks or 8 feasts or 8 Sundays. And here the name of this feast is I put the first cycle, which we call it the 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐜, the first cycle before the nativity of Jesus Christ. And here you see the entire 8 cycles throughout the year. So the first cycle up to the 8th cycle is known as 𝐾𝐲𝐽. So 𝐾𝐲𝐽 قدمويو 𝐒𝐲𝐽𝐼𝐻 ترايونو ثيلدو تليثويو دنحو ربيعويو صومو رابو حمشويو قيمتو شتيثويو we call it حرشابد مسعوية, then شتيثويو the 6th دحروية, and then the last one the 8th 𝐾�0𝐽 general Sundays. So these are the cycles that we you know, practice throughout the year. So in addition to this, there is also melodies that we call them قينوثو تحاشو, the Holy Week melodies, or we call them قينتو حاشونويتو, which is used mainly during the Shabbat Hasho, the Holy Week. So قينتو تحاشو does not follow the system of 8 or ثمانية قينوثو, nor does it make use of any qol or qinto when referring to mode. Simply it has a unique modal and melodic characteristics. So just to clarify, during the Holy Week, the Hasho week, hymns and tones do not follow the system of 8, you know, like in the other cycles throughout the year. So this week has its own and unique melodies, which are sung only during the Hajj week and are very different than melodies sung in other occasions before and after this week. So why preservation matters? As I mentioned earlier, we received a rich musical heritage, thousands of hymns across many forms and genres, and a sophisticated chant tradition built on the 8-tone system and melodies that have evolved over many centuries. So the question becomes, how do we preserve this treasure today? So we live in a different world. Our communities are spread across the globe, from Dr Aydin to Europe to America and Australia. So many of our young people no longer speak Syriac fluently. Many hear the chants in church but cannot fully understand what they mean. So if you remain passive, more melodies will slowly will change form and will eventually disappear. But if you take action, if you record, organize, and teach them according to the chant traditions we have, as we mentioned earlier, then we can ensure that these hymns continue to live for generations. So preservation does not mean tradition like a museum artifact. Preservation means keeping it alive, sung, understood, and loved. So every time a teacher or a deacon or a choir sings these hymns with devotion, their tradition renews itself. So this brings us to the Syriac Hymnal, which was published in 2018 by the Syriac Music Institute. This is one of the major publications of the Institute and is considered one of the most complete hymn books of the Syriac Orthodox Church. Includes traditional hymns from the 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐴, as well as Catholic hymns based on Syriac folk melodies, many of which were composed by Bishop Yohanna Dolabani, Abdul Masih Qarabashi, and others. So this hymnal covers all feasts and occasions of the Syriac liturgical calendar. Each hymn is presented with a Syriac text, Latin transliteration, English translation, and musical notation designed for easy reading. So you can find this hymnal online and on Amazon as well. Please get a copy. It's very, very helpful. So during the global pandemic, online learning became essential. And digital tools opened new ways to teach and share this tradition. In response, the Syriac Music Institute developed the Syriac Hymnal app, which includes the entire hymnal in digital form. So the app allows users to access Syriac chants anytime and anywhere. So in addition to the text and music notation, it also provides audio recordings for the hymns, making learning and preservation even more accessible. So this is the main topic of today's talk. And as you can see here on the screen, how the Syriac Hymnal physical book now can be found online as a digital copy. So here I'll briefly talk about the hymnal app. So today, God has given us tools that our ancestors could never have imagined. Digital recording, notation software, and even artificial intelligence. So these tools are not replacement for tradition, but servant of tradition. We can now record melodies with perfect clarity. We can store them in digital archives. We can share them instantly with parishioners across the world. So this is where technology becomes a tool of faith, a modern way to safeguard the ancient treasures of our church. So this is us to the project that grown from our collective love of Syriac chants, the Syriac Hymnal app. And here is, yes, the Syriac Hymnal app. So the Syriac Hymnal app was created to bring together our sacred Syriac hymns that have been scattered across books, manuscripts, recordings, and memories into one simple and accessible platform. It preserves and shares the ancient musical tradition of the Syriac Orthodox Church with people everywhere, whether in the Middle East or in diaspora communities. In a time shaped by digital media, the app becomes a practical tool for liturgical, theological, and musical education. Our hope is that it becomes a bridge between past and future and helping the next generation continue the tradition. So what is the mission of this app? So the mission is to keep repeating the phrase, preservation and transmission and teaching and unifying our Syriac musical heritage across all Syriac churches worldwide. And this is the mission. So it's a digital copy of the 20 Antioch hymnal, physical hymnal, as I mentioned earlier, that brings together hundreds of hymns with text, translation, audio, and notation, and allowing Syriac community worldwide to learn and sing the same melodies. It serves as a modern madrashto, musiqoit, or school of music, and marks the beginning of a long-term effort toward a unified system of hymns. So some of the key objectives of the app: we have cultural preservation and education. So the app helps safeguard the Syriac community's musical and cultural heritage by educating younger generations and offering global users insight into Syriac faith, music, and identity. The training for deacons and choir leaders. So it provides essential training tool for deacons, choirs, and music leaders, and strengthening the community's spiritual and cultural continuity. So the last key objective is that the app offers chants for all liturgical occasions, translations into multiple languages, high quality audio with instrument oud as an accompaniment, and detailed explanation of hymns and liturgies, the 8 ecclesiastical modes, and also, of course, also with chanting, with which I did all the recordings and chanting myself. So what is the global impact of the app? So the Syriac Hymnal app creates global impact by preserving an endangered musical tradition and making it accessible to everyone. In conflict-affected regions, like in the Middle East, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon today, it serves as a cultural anchor protecting Syriac identity, while regionally it builds intercultural understanding and strengthens connections between communities. Globally, it ensures these ancient chants survive despite displacements, with translations and transliterations that support diaspora youth and multilingual access that opens their tradition to the world. The app becomes a digital lifeline that protects, connects, and shares Syriac sacred music across generations and continents. And also briefly about the academic and religious resource. So as the first complete digital repository of Syriac Orthodox music, the app supports scholars, theologians, and musicians. And also it's a model for cultural preservation. And here we have the uniqueness of the app. So the Syriac Hymnal app, one of the main, if not the only digital resources that presents the complete musical tradition of Syriac-speaking churches. So what are the plans for this app? Here I can just display a couple short-term plans. So currently we are focusing on an enhancement to make the app simpler and more visually user-friendly. This includes, adjusting titles, fixing, bugs, and resolving any issues users might encounter while downloading or using the app. Another important update is that all users will start receiving weekly notifications about upcoming fees. These notifications will give a complete picture of each fees, covering historical, liturgical, theological, and musical perspectives. So, for example, for the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary, users will get a notification today before the feast, for example, explaining what the feast celebrates and why it occurs at this time of year. Why we sing, for example, Etne Shufrek, a hymn before the gospel reading, and why do we sing a hymn after the gospel reading? So the hymns for this feast, including their musical modes, traditions, and meanings, will be explained in that email or notification. So any customs associated with the feast, in this case, the Annunciation to the Virgin Mary, we have the tradition of Siboro, which is the red and white strings we put in our wreath, will also be explained in that notification. And long-term plans, so we're also planning to add several new languages to the app, including French, German, Dutch, Malayalam, and Turkish. So the platform is ready, so adding even more languages in the future is possible. So another exciting feature will be YouTube links under each hymn, allowing users to listen not only to the original melodies, but also to professionally recorded versions with instruments and soloists that are posted on YouTube. So we have many other ideas to expand the app, but for now, I think our focus is on accomplishing, these first steps. And this is what I would like to talk about the Syriac Hymnal app, Shamosho Martin. So any questions that you may have, please go ahead.
A wonderful presentation, by the way. I mean, I was there for the first time when you gave it back in November. I was still taking notes, but there's one question that was sent in. For a person in the West, when they hear Syriac chants, what would you say to claims like, oh, this just sounds like Muslim chants? Like, is there any authenticity to that statement, or is it the other way around? Like, did Syriac influence the Arab music?
Well, it depends. If you are from the Arab countries like Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Egypt, you can say that, oh, these melodies sounds like the Arabic melodies. But if you're from Turkey, for instance, then you would say, oh, this sounds like Turkish melodies. So the thing is, Syriac people who live in Turkey tend to sing Syriac melodies that are close to the Turkish, music, Turkish melodies. And those who live in the Arab countries like Syria, Iraq, and Egypt, they sing Syriac melodies a little bit closer to the Arabic musical tradition. But we have a different system of tones. Our music is different than Arabic music and Turkish music. We have our own unique tones and unique melodies. Although they sound similar, but they are very different modes, different melodies. So we cannot say, oh, this sounds like Arabic mode, therefore it's Arabic, or it's it's an Arabic melody. No, we cannot say that, because the way the melody, the way the Syriac melodies are function, the way they are built, their form, follow a completely different structure, different characteristics, which you cannot find in any other musical tradition, whether Arabic musical tradition or Turkish. So we have our own unique way of chanting, unique structure of hymns, and unique formation of hymns and melodies. Hopefully, another session we can analyze all these hymns. We can analyze Syriac tones, and we can show clearly how they differ from the Arabic or Turkish musical traditions. So they're not the same. Absolutely, they're totally different. But we are the main. We are the original If they are sound similar in some cases, that means they borrowed our melodies. They took from us, but we did not take from them.
Nice. That was a wonderful explanation. Also, we have Abin Puravat, Father Abin, Abinachin, saying, do the fixed tones for the Safro and Ramsho and Sutoro and Malankara for the days of the week, do they have any basis in any of the schools of musical tradition that you previously mentioned? Like for one of the days for the evening, we have a fixed tone 7 for Bikul Medam, for example, for a one Sutoro. Is that rooted? Is that uniform in all the schools, or is that like a specific thing?
No, the way we observe the liturgical services is the same. We have a unified system.
Mm-hmm.
All chant traditions, whether the tradition of Edessa or Mardin or Dr Aydin, follow the same concept, but some of the melodies themselves a little bit change. Again, I have to clarify the frame of the melody of the hymn does not change, but there are some embellishments added by different chant traditions which affect a little bit the melody, the tone, but not the form, itself. But all traditions follow the concept of the system of 8 modes. So either when we sing in the Shemo, like during weekdays, Ramsho or Safro, which formed based on the system of 8 modes. So yes, some of the hymns are fixed. For example, when you look at the Holy Eucharist, Holy Liturgy, we have some fixed hymns. The melody doesn't change and the text doesn't change. We have one text and one melody. But all other services follow the system of 8 tones. Every week we make use of 2 different modes, and these modes are used every week. And then the following week a different pair of modes, and the week after that other pair. So we don't use fixed hymns during the Shemo practices. Again, we follow the system of 8 tones.
We have another question.
Yes.
For should there be uniformity in all these tones with all these different schools for diaspora purposes? And is there any use or potential consideration for use of AI for the development of the Syriac Hymnal app to accelerate mission out here? So those are our 2 main questions that we're getting.
Yes, just briefly to answer the question of that Shamosho. What was again the first question? I'm trying to think of the first question.
Should we
Yes.
for in diaspora, should we be reconciling these differences between
have a unified system? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's the purpose of creating the hymnal app, to be honest. So we can have a unified system of hymns and chants. It's kind of like practically it's impossible to unify all these traditions and have one unified tradition. But what I have done in the Syriac Hymnal book as well as in the hymnal app, I tried to offer, for instance, a couple options, 2 or 3 hymn options for the post-gospel hymn. So I tried to select the mostly known and mostly widely practiced hymns and added them to that particular feast. So this way, if you are from Dr Aydin and you know the post-gospel hymn that you love and it's widespread used in Dr Aydin, you would sing that. And then if you are from Edessa, from Urho or Aleppo, for instance, you would chant the other hymn that that belongs to the tradition of Edessa. Here I gave 2 or 3 different options, and again, not trying to push one particular melody from from a particular tradition onto other people. But here I give them options so they can choose and select the hymn that they like to sing in their churches. But again, moving forward, we have to have one unified tradition like all other Christian churches. So we cannot have really different chants, different melodies for the same feast or for the same occasion. If you want to unify our system, we have to have one hymn designed for that particular occasion, one melody and one text, and everybody should, or hopefully will sing that melody. And that way, a few years from now, we will be able to have a unified system where everywhere, where you live in the Middle East or in America or in Europe, you'll be able to chant the same hymn and the same melody. And then the Syriac Hymnal app will become very, very useful to will become as a tool to unify the Syriac chant tradition.
There's actually a quote that I just remembered. And you might know more about this, Malphono, regarding like the differences between the schools and stuff. There was like a monk that was complaining about the lack of musical cohesion going up to Barsalibi. And Barsalibi replies saying like, God is owed all the different types, varied types of musical worship unto him. So, it's nice that there are like these different little minute differences between the schools of Syriac music. But then again, it's nice that the Syriac hymnal is keeping that in mind, being very conscious of those differences, maintaining those distinctions while aiming for uniformity in what we do. The second part of the question was application of AI potentially for further development of the app. Is that a thing?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, everything's going towards that direction. So might as well we benefit from that platform as well.
Cool. Yeah. It's I mean, as you were explaining this wonderful presentation, I was trying to like make comparisons with my own Western music education and like the differences and like the origin of the Syriac Church with like the Catholic Church, for example. Like we're always aiming for like simplicity in chant, like how Malphono did, in order to teach and edify the people that he was committing to helping, and they were helping the church and stuff. And you have you compare that with like the Renaissance period of the Roman Catholic Church, a person like Palestrina making the Pope Marcellus Mass, and like all these polyphonies, like these interweaving melodic lines, and people are complaining, all we hear is melody, but what is actually being said? And it's like that balance you mentioned earlier between mezzo and colo, the text and the tone. It's a symbiotic relationship that has to be maintained and kept in a genuine form. And another thing, because I knew that we weren't going to be able to mention this, but I want to mention quite briefly, like for the longest time in the Western church, like women were banned from singing in church. Like it's only until like the turn of the 20th century where the European churches, started to make women get more involved in the sacramental life. Whereas Malphono, from like the earliest period of church history, was already employing women to sing his hymns, his hymnography. So that was like another thing that people in the West don't really realize necessarily. But another thing about like edification, we often take for granted what we have, especially those who are like born in diaspora, about how like significant our hymnography is and how we emphasize congregational participation. this past Sunday, we were at the Virgin Mary Cathedral, and it's unique for a person coming from a Lankara background because the fifth Sunday of Lent for us is the 𝐼𝐲𝐫𝐢, the crippled woman.
Yeah.
But in the Syriac churches, the fifth Sunday is the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan man, right? So it was my first time hearing the Good Samaritan hymns, and like in the post Evangelion hymn, like it's like a very beautiful comparison of like how the thieves they beat up the guy on the road, and like the Levite and the priest came, they didn't help him, and 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚𝐼𝐴 𝐾𝐿𝐻, another great hymnographer, compares the Levites and the priest to Abraham and Moses, because we
Yes.
can't receive salvation ultimately through them, but it's only through the Good Samaritan, which is Jesus Christ, who came and clothed us with his body and blood, that we are saved. So, I mean, that type of like, congregational participation versus biblical exegesis, how do we read scripture? Interwoven with like simple ABA format melodies. It truly is a treasure.
Yes.
So
Yes, I mean, just to emphasize that point, Shamosho Martin, I mean, when we look at the, Western musical tradition, you would often hear, they have a musical form, they have, all classical music, they have forms. But when it comes to Syriac chant, when you talk about this form, and then people think that how come like we don't know about these melodic form, which is almost 1800 years old form that was created during St. Ephrem and before even St. Ephrem, because as St. Ephrem emphasizes this point, how Syriac hymns were composed through sentences, melodic sentences, and half sentences, full sentences, etc. So again, to go back to what you have just said about St. Ephrem's compositions, he composed in a very simple way to teach, to transmit the faith to to those who are being converted into Christianity. So he used hymns, music as a tool to teach Christian faith. So here he was dealing with illiterate people, so people who cannot read and write, who could not read and write. So music, basic hymns, basic melodies were the only way to be able to teach, these people the Christian faith, as St. Ephrem did. And we can use the same concept, the same tool today to teach these hymns, our faith, our Christian faith today to our youth, even beyond, the Syriac speaking churches, using the same simple melody to spread, our faith. So if this worked during St. Ephrem in the 4th century, I think it can work, today as well. So one of the main characteristics of Syriac chant or Syriac music is the simplicity of melodies. Shamosho Martin, when you analyze any classical Western musical piece, you would see that that piece contains modulation, like different modes in one single piece. So in Syriac chant repertory, we don't see that. There's only maybe a couple of hymns throughout the 𝐏𝐫𝐨𝐽𝐬 that I know, that have modulation in the middle of the hymn. But 99% of our chant repertory, if the hymn starts with one single tone or mode and remains in the same and finishes in the same tone, there is no modulation in between. So this was designed, like this for a reason. So not to complicate things for those who would like to learn about the Christian faith, to make it easier on them to learn, memorize, and understand.
And that's a really good last point you made there, because like, looping it back to like theology, to creating missions in the West, like that's something that will speak to a lot of like English-speaking people, where if they want to join like an original Semitic church, like if the question ever comes up, how did Saint Mary and the apostles chant the Psalms when they were waiting for the Holy Spirit on Pentecost? What would that sound like? Like you come to the Syriac Orthodox Church and you hear it, and like with the Syriac hymnal, with the English hymnal, that would, Lord willing, be coming up. It gives like an opportunity for English-speaking people to engage in that really ancient Syriac Aramaic mode of worship while understanding it through an English medium. And that's so powerful because it's one thing to read the texts, of Saint Ephrem, but it's another thing to read it, to sing it, in its original, traditional Suryoyo way of worship. So notation is a really powerful mechanism, I want to say, to help demonstrate and translate that tradition to more people who are not in the church yet.
Well, that brings us to the other project that we have been working on, Shamosho Martin. You know about the project, the English Syriac Hymnal project.
Mm-hmm.
I think just for our viewers and listeners, we have been working on a project called English Syriac Hymnal project, which contains all the hymns for the Holy Liturgy sung in English text, but with original traditional Syriac hymn melodies.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned, let's talk about this briefly, Martin. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So briefly, as I mentioned, earlier, the Syriac Orthodox Church of Antioch has one of the oldest musical and liturgical traditions in Christianity. In this tradition, hymns are very important because they teach the faith, as we just discussed, through both words and music. So the theology is not just explained; it is sung and experienced during worship. Again, so in the Syriac tradition, hymns have always been a way of teaching. So this is we can call it sung theology. One of the most important figures, in this, as we mentioned, is Saint Ephrem. So who wrote many teaching hymns that help people understand the Bible and the faith. So again, these hymns were usually sung in a simple call and response style or responsorial, a technique where one person sings and the group responds. So this made it easy for everyone to participate, learn, and remember. And we see this example also with the Daughter of the Covenant. We call them in Syriac 𝐒𝐲𝐫𝐢𝐚𝐜 during St. Ephrem's time. So there was two lecterns, two 𝐒𝐫𝐫𝐚𝐜 formed, one from the Daughters of the Covenant, 𝐒𝐲𝐫𝐼𝐚𝐜, and the other one deacons. And there was always a solo chanting and a refrain repeated, by the group of people. So one of the Virgin ladies would sing a solo part, and then the rest would reply with a refrain. So we see that style was practiced during St. Ephrem even before St. Ephrem. So today, especially in English-speaking communities, many young people do not fully understand Syriac, as you just mentioned. So even though they love the melodies, they may not understand the meaning of the words. So this is where the Syriac English Hymnal project comes in. So the goal is to translate the hymns of the Holy Korbono into English in a way that they can still be sung using the original Syriac melodies. So at the same time, the translations stay faithful to the original meaning. So musical notation is also included to help choirs learn the hymns more easily. As you mentioned, musical notation is also very important nowadays to supplement, the translation, the text with the musical notation, because most of our children, most of us know how to read musical notations.
Mm-hmm.
So this project has many benefits. So it helps young people, or whether Syriac or not Syriac, understand their faith better, and it encourages them to participate more in church. It also supports new and growing communities, especially in the English-speaking world, by giving them access to this tradition in a language they understand. So this is a brief. In the end, the mission of the project is both to preserve and to share. So it keeps the ancient musical tradition of the church alive, while also making it accessible to new generations and new communities. So in this way, the faith is not only preserved, but truly understood, lived, and passed on. And this is a project that we have been working on, and with collaboration of Shamosho Martin. Hopefully, it will be finished soon and published, in the near future. And then hopefully we can have another session with Shamosho Martin on this platform to discuss that project together.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Because I know there, potentially, some people might wonder, the notation, is that part of the Syriac tradition? I was rereading 𝐒𝐲𝐫𝐢𝐚𝐜's book on the Sense and Sadness, Syriac Chant in Aleppo, and there was a really interesting footnote that she writes, saying that Malphono Dr, who was a bishop that lived up to the mid-20th century, I think, he found a West Syriac manuscript of Madroshe and Bethgazo from the mid-14th century that has symbols above the letters, sort of like what you showed earlier in the presentation, Malphono, with symbols that indicate an elevation, a lowering, a maintenance of pitch. And in the footnote, Dolabani states that, these types of musical symbols were in use in the Syriac church up until the 15th century, where then it relied more so on oral tradition. So I mean, it's there, it's sort of there. So the musical hymnal, whether it's in Syriac or in English, it will be nice to have that, that it's going to be a reoccurring standard in which how we to disciple more people and to further catechize people who are already in the church. So we had one more question, I think.
Just I'd like to comment about on that, Shamosho Martin, about the Bethgazo, the early signs. Well, these musical signs are found in some of the Bethgazo manuscripts, mainly the Bethgazo of Damascus or Darmsuk, and I think also one of the Bethgazos can be found in Mardin. They have some sort of musical signs, in addition to the melodic form, which I mentioned earlier, shuroyo, musoyo, and shulomo. But yes, even before the 14th century, in the Bethgazo manuscript shows that there was the use of musical signs in the manuscript, written above, the text. But again, that could be the Melkite tradition. As we don't have any evidence showing that these musical signs, were practiced, before the 13th or 14th centuries. This could be added afterwards or during that time into the Bethgazo manuscripts, but before then, you can find in other, older manuscripts only the melodic form, the musical form, as I mentioned earlier, shuroyo, musoyo, shulomo, as that's clearly written in the Bethgazo manuscript. But as the musical notation, later, I gave a lecture about this at Brown University a few years back. We have some Bethgazo that shows that contains beautifully, musical signs above the theme. But I wasn't able to figure out the melody that was written, through these musical symbols. Again, that could be something unique to the Malphono, to the scribe who wrote that Bethgazo or that hymn. He put those signs only for himself, to read or to teach the melody, not for everyone to understand, what he was reading. But again, there's something that we can, have a further research on, and to show how these musical signs were used and when, and how were they helpful back then, and how today musical notation can be helpful, in this mission to spread and to teach, our musical tradition and our faith to our youth, and also to the Western, audiences.
Wonderful. I think one more question. What advice would you give to the average parishioner who wants to go deeper into Syriac hymnography, and can you comment on what you gained through this wonderful project?
Well, in order to be able to learn this tradition, the chant tradition, very well, not very well, but in a way that you would be able to observe liturgical services, with accuracy, is to attend some theological seminaries, to learn and to experience this tradition. In the West, in the Western world, Western countries, it's difficult to learn about this tradition unless we have madrashto, we have schools, or we have institutions that teach these traditions and melodies. But I would say the best way is, or the best places to learn this tradition is to go to a monastery or a theological seminary, such as the Patriarchate in Damascus or in Lebanon now, or go to Dr Aydin, to Mor Gabriel Monastery, Tel Zafran Monastery, or our monasteries in Europe, like Morafel Monastery in Holland, and then we have also now a seminary in Sweden and also in Austria. But in order to be able to learn, the chant tradition, is to attend one of these, seminaries and theological seminaries, and to live with the students and monks, and to chant these melody chants every single day until you have a good grip of the melodies, and then you'll be able to sing them with confidence. Also, again, the Syriac Hymnal app that we just release, and other projects will also be helpful here in the West to learn, and will be like also a good I would say sources to learn about Syriac chant and Syriac music.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I guess this will be a good place to conclude. I want to say thank you once again to the Urho team, and especially to Father Renjan and Marin, and the most wonderful Jogan Shamosho for helping set up this very much needed presentation about Syriac chant, and for the hymnal app. It's truly a blessing that we were all able to come here to talk about this. So praise God for that. I'd like to wish everyone a blessed fasting season, both here and back in India and abroad. And to a significant and tremendous thank you to everyone who tuned in to watch this.
Yes, thank you very much, Shamosho Martin, and thank you, the Urho, the Way team, for the opportunity to introduce Syriac chant and the Syriac Hymnal app, and also thank you those who have been watching us, and thanks to everyone here, in the West, in Dr Aydin, in all over the world, for being a part of this historic initiative with the Syriac Hymnal, or the Syriac Hymnal app, and also the upcoming English Syriac Hymnal. So the Syriac musical heritage belongs to all of us, and by cherishing teaching and wisely using the tools available to us, we ensure it remains a living voice of prayer for generations to come. So one day our children and grandchildren will open the app and learn 𝐏𝐫𝐸𝐚, a hymn, excuse me, a hymn, and sing the same melodies once offered in the monasteries of Dr Aydin, and showing that this tradition survives not by memory alone, but through active love. And again, thank you, Shamosho Martin, and thank you, the Urho the Way team, for the opportunity. It was a great, to be here with you.
Likewise.
𝐊𝐶𝐦𝐴𝐚𝐜, and 𝐿𝐶𝐫𝐫𝐚𝐜.
Salam to you as well.
Bye-bye.